Everybody, welcome to this fourth episode of the Balkanizer. We started by talking about our individual paths to living here. We both live in Serbia. Um, and then we sort of realized, got a bit of feedback, and we realized that we needed to sort of paint a bigger picture about what the Balkans is. And there's, of course, various understandings of this idea. Um, and the obvious place to start is physical geography. Um, but before that, in a way, we need to look at sort of mental geography that people have, because people don't, their idea of what the Balkan, if we talk about Western Europe, particularly, people from the UK, for example, where we come from, um, that their concept of what the Balkans is not as clear as, for example, their concept of the Iberian Peninsula, i.e. Spain and Portugal, or the Italian Peninsula. But in fact, there's a third peninsula in Southern Europe, and that's the Balkans. And we just wanted to draw people's attention to that, if you like. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
In broadest
to
terms.
place it geographically.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so Charlie, what would you say about that concept?
Well, I thought that yeah, most people think of geography as countries, don't they? So, I mean, and part of the problem, perhaps, with the Balkans is that the main country that was there vanished in the 1990s. So, um, it's left something of a gap there in between Italy and Turkey, perhaps. But that to my mind, helps to locate the area we're talking about quite effectively. You go east of Italy across the Adriatic, and there you are in the Balkans. Um, by the time you reach Constantinople, you've left it. So, or Istanbul and the border with Turkey, you're coming into Asia Minor, and then you're out of the region.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
but
people, perhaps the sort of the Western mind stops at Austria. I mean, my own prelude to living
mm,
here was actually living in Hungary. I lived in Hungary for a long time, and that
yeah,
was a big step. I didn't really know anything about Hungary, and I would say that's the next geographical region, the neighboring geographical region, which is Carpathia, if you like. You have the Carpathian
yeah.
Mountains in the middle of that, the Carpathian Basin. Um, and then the Balkan region is the region south of that. Um,
Yeah, perhaps one of the names that people know of places here is Croatia, yeah, and the
yes,
Croatian islands. A lot of people talk about that. Very
yes,
beautiful area of the world, so that perhaps is familiar to people. But that is yeah, um, that Adriatic coastline is
yes. So that's part of this area we're talking
one of the
about.
southern boundaries. Yeah,
We're talking about the whole region. Um, so that's why we have the map up here. And we just need to start by defining more precisely what the Balkan Peninsula is. So
yeah,
in the broader sense, just looking at this is zoomed out completely here. If you take a line from here, like the northwest corner, i.e. the northernmost tip of the Adriatic, and you go straight across to the northernmost tip of the Black Sea, that would be a sort of maximum physical definition, which would take in Romania, southern
yeah.
Hungary, which are not necessarily Balkan in the full sense. Certainly,
Hmm.
central Hungary wouldn't be considered as that. Um, so but then a more precise geographical definition is usually the line starting here at the Black Sea, the line of the Danube, as it runs to the west, which actually forms for much of the way the boundary between Romania and Bulgaria. And then there's a bit where it's the boundary between Serbia and Bulgaria, and then it becomes the boundary between Romania and Bulgaria. It goes through the Carpathians and it comes out in sort of eastern Serbia and eventually Belgrade, which is here. And Belgrade is the point where the Sava River meets the Danube. and that would continue the line of the geographical Balkans. You follow the Sava, this down here, and you have this line. So basically, this whole hilly and mountainous region to the south of that line, which goes up into what we call Slovenia now, the southern southeastern Alps, if you like. So
Yes, yes,
um, that's that's generally what you would understand as well by it, Charlie.
yes, yeah, yeah. That to me makes the good sense as the sort of northern boundary, the Sava coming down from the Alps in Slovenia. It rises in very alpine conditions there, and it joins the Danube in Serbia at Belgrade, and yeah, then breaks its way through the Carpathians, through this impressive gorge called the Iron Gates, and then down and forms the border between Bulgaria and Romania. So yeah, everything south of that for me is the Balkans.
Yes.
What do you think about including Greece in the
Well,
Balkans?
yeah, okay. So that's the sort of next point, looking at the maritime boundary. So obviously, on the
Mm,
west you have the Adriatic all the way down here, making the line between Italy and the Balkans, and then you have the Mediterranean, the open Mediterranean, which is south of Greece here, and the Aegean, which is between Greece and modern day Turkey. And then you go up and you've got the Black Sea. So that's the shape of the peninsula as it's defined by the water boundaries.
yeah.
Um, and so that sort of brings us to the question of is Greece in the Balkans? Well, I think in a
Yeah.
purely geographical definition, it is because it's that whole peninsula. Um, but there is sort of maybe cultural, historical sense where the Balkans has a more like a central continental aspect of that. What would you say?
Mhm. Yes, well, I mean, I think of Greece as being Mediterranean. I mean, climatically, it has a similar um, um, climate to the rest of the Mediterranean world, doesn't it? You know, we have olive trees growing there, we have citrus fruits, and not very much in the way of frosts. But the Balkans is the hinterland behind that for me, at any
Yes,
rate.
yes. Yeah, so perhaps
Um,
we could distinguish between the Balkans and
yeah,
the Balkan Peninsula is obviously what
yeah,
we're looking at on this map, but the Balkans is something a sort of part of that. Um,
hmm
if people say the Balkans in that way, it tends to mean, what we would call former Yugoslavia, the Western Balkan states. The
We
mountain
haven't talked.
action, yes.
Sorry, no, no, we haven't talked about it, but I do. See they use the singular verb with the Balkans is, yeah, and to my mind, sometimes it's a bit confusing. I don't know what to do. Is that the standard,
Yeah,
or
well, that's a
does
good
that mean
point.
say
I
the
think
Balkans are?
yes.
Mm,
So if we talk about the Balkans proper, actually, this mountain range here, which is like the
hmm
backbone of Bulgaria, these are the Balkan mountains, So it's just like
Yeah,
you would say, the Alps. Would you say the Alps is or the Alps are? The Alps are the main mountain range in Europe.
yeah, I think I'd go with the Alps are, yeah, but
Yeah, okay.
I'm not
So
sure.
so
Yeah,
certainly if we say this, but very few people are going to talk about this as the Balkans because it's very much a geographical term, this mountain range here.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but the Balkans is a hotspot or the Balkans are. Yeah, that's a good grammatical question. Um,
Particularly when you start using a pronoun as well.
yeah. Yeah,
Where
you would
are
say,
they?
yeah, where
Where
are
is
they?
it?
Where is
Yeah.
it? Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
So yeah, there's something indeterminate there again about the region. Yeah, but I suppose the other, and I don't know whether we mentioned it, but yes, there's the absence of Yugoslavia now, and these all these other little states which people may have heard of and know something about, but not 100% clear where they lie. Yeah, so Croatia, Bosnia,
yes.
Serbia, Macedonia, and Bulgaria. Yeah,
Yeah, so
the Slavic states of the Balkans. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's a certain um I don't know, section of the community who would take an interest. I think people who are into geopolitics, or obviously they're going to know about it.
Hmm.
Tourists, sort of, off the beaten track tourists,
Yeah,
would
yeah.
begin.
Hmm.
They would know they would be taking an interest in this. But the sort of mass tourism, as you say, that's more like Croatia. I don't know, Montenegro. Do you think that has a bit of a profile? People do go
I
there.
wonder. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Um,
so
I
yeah,
not so much from the West, I would have thought. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, but I'm not 100% certain about that. But yeah, I think that Westerners, they watched Game of Thrones and
yes,
they know about Dubrovnik, and
yeah.
there's a certain
And certainly,
cachet to
and
the
of
whole
course,
idea of the.
Greece. People have been going to Greece
Well, yeah,
holiday.
yeah. I
I
have a
think
feeling
particularly
that Greece.
Corfu, actually. Corfu, I remember when I was
Mhm.
a kid, this was had
Yep.
its seems to stand out above
Is
other
that
Greek resorts for at least for British visitors. Uh,
possibly because of the popularity of My Family and Other Animals,
yes, yeah, that's right. Just
and
that
the
same thing.
Durrells
It's
in
Darren
general?
Darrell,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Um, so these are sort of conceptual aspects. And we could talk a bit about our own experience of the physical side of things, which would
yeah,
be, for me, I could sort of say coming from Hungary. I lived in Hungary, as I said, for a long time before coming here. And that is largely flat. You have this Carpathian Basin, the plain. It's called the Great Plain in Hungary. That's the sort of eastern, southeastern part of Hungary.
yes, yes. It
And
really is
that's
very
just
flat.
just
Yeah,
really here at the top of this map. That's what that is. So that's going to be southern Hungary. And then you come into this area called Vojvodina, which is like the north of Serbia. And there's just like one mountain ridge here that was called Fruška Gora. Um, and then you come down to the Danube, and that's where Belgrade is. Belgrade historically, the old city is a peninsula where between the Sava and the Danube.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And has
and
always been a border region. Yeah,
yes, yeah,
geographically, it's
that's right.
clearly
Yeah, it's
the
been
end of the mountains and the
yeah, it's
beginning of
sort
the
of been
plain.
changing hands.
And geopolitically, it's always
Yeah,
been
yeah.
on
So
the edge of things.
that's the first thing I mentioned. Do you want to mention another geographical feature that you've
Well, I suppose
featured in your life?
I mean there are the main rivers, aren't there? The ones which are divide up the mountain range there. I mean the Narek Alps. Um, there's the Una to the west there, which separates Bosnia from Croatia, and then uh, the other the eastern border of Bosnia is separated from Serbia by the river Drina. Um, so these are all important
Yeah, and these all
landmarks
flow into
in
the
the.
Danube. Yeah.
These are all these are the northward flowing
That's
rivers
right.
into
So
the Danube.
you have
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Danube flood basin, which I'm going to sort of
Hmm.
something like this. It's going down here somewhere, and
Well, yes, in fact, the Una and the Drina flow into the Sava, but then ultimately into
that
the
yeah, that flows
Danube.
into
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So okay, so then I think the next thing we'd mention is the Morava, which flows.
Yeah.
That's this one which flows into the Danube, um, and that's very significant, isn't it? Because it's been
Yes.
the trade route over the centuries.
Yeah,
Um,
traders, invaders, they're
yes,
all coming down there. Yeah,
yeah.
the first crusade and the second crusade and what have you,
Yeah. So, and you can still get
following
that
of
experience now
Alexander
because the
the Great.
motorway runs down there.
Yeah,
So you still get that feeling of transition as the motorway, you sort of drive into Belgrade, you come out the other side and you're in this wooded region. The motorway is actually running through this. Um, but there's also a bit of a floodplain, on each side for quite a lot of the way. So you're getting this sort of mixture of more open country and more hilly country. Um, and then that's eventually, once you get south of Nish, you're heading into the mountains. Um,
yes. Well, that's the point where the traditional route bifurcates, isn't it? One turns due east, more or
yes,
less, into Bulgaria,
yeah.
and over there,
So that's
following
here,
the
isn't it? Here you're going off into
yeah, yeah,
Bulgaria, somewhere like
down
that.
towards Sofia
And
in
that's
the
towards Sofia here. And then, you're going
the south
down.
of the. the Balkan Mountains there.
into
Yeah,
into the mountains, into Skopje. So you have
yeah,
what's now northern Macedonia here, which is a sort of plateau country in some ways, isn't it? It's like, a bit like we mentioned
yeah.
the
A bit
Kosovo
high and
region, it's a
dry. Yeah,
plateau, yeah.
yeah.
So you sort of drive up and you end up in North Macedonia. Skopje is the capital city there. And then you slowly head down. This is the Vardar River, which becomes the Axios in Greece. And the delta of the Axios is here, and Thessaloniki is there.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
that's an important route down that way. Yeah, and
you know. So
um,
that's, I mean, very broadly, we mentioned, we've got the mountains, there's Dinaric Alps, the ones on the west side here. We mentioned the Balkans. You have Pindus in northern Greece. See how a large part of northern Greece is mountainous here.
mhm.
Um, so very broadly, that's the physical geography of it. I
Yes.
think,
Well, I suppose we should mention the Sea of Marmara there
yeah, yeah. So
and
right up here. So
Constantinople,
in fact,
Istanbul.
yeah,
Yeah,
going
yeah.
right here, and so Europe extends. So we have to, if we're talking about the Balkan Peninsula in its wider sense, it includes the southwest corner here, which has
Hmm.
what's now Istanbul, and in Byzantine times was Constantinople.
Yeah,
Uh, so that's, extremely important historical city, but it's actually part of the Balkan Peninsula.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so that sort of brings us to cities, doesn't it? We wanted to mention cities as well.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, so
Um,
we start from the west and go east.
yeah, that's right. So let's sort of start up here. I think
I
you'll be.
don't know whether you think because of its cultural and historical significance. In many ways, I think Venice should be included as it's not a
Well, I
Balkan
mean, it could
city,
be
but
mentioned. It's not. I guess
it's
it's not actually in the
it
Balkans,
is
is it?
often it is the starting point of many Balkan journeys,
Yeah,
and
that's right. Certainly. So
always has
this
been.
whole
Yeah,
coast has been highly influenced, hasn't it? And even
yeah,
controlled
yeah.
by
Hmm.
the Venetians.
Yes, well, nearly all the larger cities of the Croatian coast there have um, um, a long connection with Venice, and what I'm most familiar with is this Korčula in the central region there of the Adriatic coast,
Oh
and
yes.
yeah, it's a small walled city. Most famous or its greatest claim to fame is being the home city of Marco Polo.
Oh,
So
oh yeah. Okay.
that's it's very very
Yeah.
typical of
Okay. So
the
that was
kind of
part
towns
of
you
the
encounter along the
Venetian
coast there.
culture.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
very much so. Yeah, St. Mark is everywhere. The line of St. Mark, and yeah, it's left its mark all when there. Dubrovnik though is a slightly different,
Hmm.
historically known as the Republic of Ragusa. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
So that's down
it
here.
had its own more independent identity and was very influential in the Central Balkans as well. I mean, the people of Dubrovnik they
Yeah.
have
Yeah, and
um,
I think you have an
very good
interesting
records. Yeah.
yeah. I remember you have an interesting comment about the name Montenegro. This
Right. Yeah.
name.
Uh-huh. Well,
So,
it gives you an idea, I think, of the how the Venetian Italianate culture of the coast viewed the Balkan
yes,
interior.
yes,
Montenegro in Italian means the Black Mountain. Yeah. In
yes,
Serbian, it's the same. Crna Gora, the the black thing that you can see when you're sailing your galley down the coast. There, you look up
yes.
and you see these mountains, and that's what they are. It's the Black
It's a
Mountain.
dark,
It's what happens.
unknown,
Yeah,
dark region or something like that.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah,
And I think
yes. And I
that's
think
echoed in many ways all along the coast, isn't it?
yeah, and so
In
it sort of brings us
Thessalonica.
connects with the Greek question as well,
Hmm.
doesn't it? That this sort of dichotomy between the interior
Hmm.
and the coast. And of course, Greek culture was very much the culture of the coastal regions. These little Greek republics they had down, particularly in this southern region.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Contrasted with the sort of, here we have, as you can see, the continental and what's called Macedonia in historic, Macedonia as the historic nation, as the Roman
Of
province
yeah,
around
Philip and
here with
Alexander.
its
Yeah.
huge inland element. Okay, so
But
that
yes, if we go back to the cities, I mean, yes, I started with Venice, but then you've got the border city there between Italy um, and well, Slovenia now. Trieste, it's in
yes,
Italy, but it's always been right on the edge, changing hands from
yes, yeah,
one empire or one republic to another. And then if you follow the northern inland route along the Sava there, you've got Ljubljana, which is now the capital of
yeah.
Slovenia.
So we're up here.
Um,
Yeah,
a small Middle European, very, to my mind, very Germanic in its appearance. You know, the typical
yes,
kind of architecture that you see in the small towns of Austria and the Alps. Zagreb,
yes,
similar to my mind. It's a small Middle European country, a city, the capital of Croatia, but very different from the Croatian cities of the coast in appearance.
yes,
And
yeah,
then right slap bang in the middle of the Balkan Mountains, there we've got Sarajevo,
yeah. So that's down
which
here. Yeah, yeah.
which still has what I would call an Ottoman feel to it
Yes,
in much of its architecture and also in its culture. So
yeah,
Muslim majority population, and um, you know it's you feel the similarity between Sarajevo and Istanbul. You know
yeah,
the great
yes,
Muslim markets in Istanbul are echoed the market there in Sarajevo, and the minarets and the calls
that's
to
right. I
prayer
mean that,
and
and
so on.
my experience of that is Tuzla.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, mhm,
so that's very much at the boundary between like the Serb community, the
mhm,
Orthodox region, and but you come over this. There's one valley. There's a village called Lopara or town. It's in one valley. You go over the hill, and by the way, the road becomes very bad actually. To get
mhm.
over the hill, you get on this sort of dirt track,
Yeah,
and then you come
yeah.
down the other side, and suddenly you've got mosques.
Mhm.
Um, so you
Well,
see
there's a
that.
lot of that still in Bosnia, isn't there? You know,
Yeah,
these sudden divisions. You don't quite sure whether you're in
yeah,
one
that's
entity
right.
or the
Yeah,
other. You know,
yeah,
whether it's the Serbian entity, Republika Srpska, or the Bosnian Croatian Federacija, Federation.
yeah.
Um,
Okay, so
so
that
quite
would
where the cutoff is.
then we would go, I guess, to Belgrade.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
I
as
think
we
it must be
said,
the most populous city in
yes,
the Balkans.
that's right.
Thessalonica is probably larger, but Belgrade
Yeah,
is
that's right. I guess that in terms of conurbation, there are,
mhm,
similar size of population. Belgrade, I think it's something like 44 times it's been destroyed by, in battle, in various
yes,
military contexts. So, you don't get the same continuity of architecture. For example, if you compare it with Budapest,
no,
which hasn't suffered
hmm
the same kind of sheer number of destructive incursions. So you get this real architectural medley. There's very little that
hmm
survives from a much earlier period. There are some Roman remains. There's this Kalemegdan. So there are some older things at
yeah,
the end
yeah.
there. But really,
I
and
was reading
yes,
reading recently about the um, Middle Byzantine Cathedral. I think they're talking 11th century. And
yes.
they know there was a Middle Byzantine Cathedral in Belgrade,
Oh,
but the
really?
only architectural remains they have is one column capital.
Oh, really? Really?
That's it.
Yeah.
So it gives you an idea of
Well,
yes, how
that's
many
it. I mean,
times
you
Belgrade has
really
been
do
knocked
get this
down and
feeling,
rebuilt
and
again.
so you have typically you will often have in a street in Belgrade, you've got some post-war, post-Second World War, fairly nondescript structure, but next to some more classical sort of 19th, early 20th century structure, and that's very typical.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and there is a bit of Turkish, isn't there? There are a few remains of the Ottoman period
There are,
here
yes.
and there.
There's a mosque in Belgrade, and these I think they're called but these um, uh, they are tombs essentially. There's one in Kalemegdan and one near Studenski Park, the student park in the center of town there, and they are um, uh, small chapel-like buildings with usually with a sarcophagus of some sort inside. Um, So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So that
about
so that
it.
you know that,
Mm.
that Belgrade
Mm.
is this sort of historically multicultural, we could say, and in many ways
Mhm.
now is there are quite a few people coming here from different parts of
Yes,
the
yes. Well, now
world.
it's in a process of expansion again, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And the modern, of course, the modern conurbation, and in fact, the modern municipality is very big, taking in sort of rural,
Yep.
formerly, well, still rural areas around it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, that leaves us just really with time for Thessaloniki.
Yeah.
I personally lived there for 5 years, so I've got a bit of first-hand experience of that.
Hmm.
Um, what to say about that? Historic Thessaloniki is, or is the actual historical Thessaloniki is this the old town which runs actually has much of the walls are still more or less extant on the slope in the center there. There are Roman remains, particularly Galerius, the Roman
Hmm.
who
Late
shared,
Roman Emperor, yeah.
yeah, yeah, who was there. He built his palace and mausoleum, probably is the rotunda there. Um,
Yes, I'm not sure what it was intended for, but in fact, he was well, I think it was a cremation burial in the end, but that was up in near Zaječar
yeah, that's right. So he
uh,
connects also with modern day
northeastern
Serbia, doesn't he?
Serbia.
That
Yeah, yeah.
northern area. So uh, that's
But yes, we'll get onto that in a
in
later.
another
Yeah,
episode. Yeah, and of
yeah.
course we need also to mention Istanbul again. Well, we mentioned that already, but
Yes,
that sort of ties
touched on it.
in.
Yes, but
Yeah,
that
we're coming.
is the well, the beginning and the end of the Balkans, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Constantinople,
So
um,
Thessaloniki sort of
Byzantium, the great
yeah,
city,
yeah.
um,
So there we are. I mean,
New Rome.
again, actually in Thessaloniki, you also have some remains of you have minaret and
Yes.
like
Hmm.
baths, Turkish baths.
Hmm.
So remains of
Well,
that.
I mean, the architecture. If you correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the feeling that the architecture around about the central market there and Aristotle Square and so on in Thessalonica, it feels a little more Oriental to me than much of
Yeah,
the
yes.
northern
Yeah,
Balkans.
that's right. And you have these classic, if you go up the hill, Anapoli, which is a place I
Hmm.
actually lived for a while, actually, you have this
Hmm.
typical Balkan, what we call Balkan architecture, these overhanging
Yeah,
upper
yeah,
floors. You know,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
characteristic there.
Yes, well, we see that all over the place. A lot of that in Bosnia and in some in Serbia as well. But yeah, I have a feeling, yes, it's still more obvious perhaps in Thessalonica
Okay, well,
or
I mean, that's
Thessaloniki.
about all we have time for today. So, but it leads us on probably to looking at something more historical as we're still trying to paint this big
Yes, well,
picture.
we've been trying to stick to geography, haven't we? We keep
Yeah.
drifting into history, and that's inevitable, I think, in the region we're dealing with.
So we'll keep that for a later one, later episode. So thanks everybody for your attention, and we'll see you on the next one. Uh,
Great, thank you.
cheers.